Small town bartender's deadly secret unveiled. What Navy SEALs discovered will haunt you forever. In the heart of Little Elm, Texas, beneath its unremarkable facade, lay a world fraught with secrets, a world where the buzzing neon lights of the local bar masked whispers of fate's true intentions. Greg Parker, the local bartender, was a man of few words, his hands always busy, shaking cocktails or pouring shots. Yet, behind those amber eyes, a deadly knowledge brewed, waiting to surface. The locals adored him, a friendly face who remembered everyone's drink before they even sat down. But little did they know, those smiles hid tales that could shatter the strongest of wills. It all started one gloomy evening, when a group of Navy SEALs walked into the Red Fox Tavern. They had the kind of presence that sent shivers down spines. With muscles made of steel and eyes scanning the room like predators, they didn't fit the usual crowd. The air thickened as they approached the bar, and Greg felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Something shifted in the silence, electrifying the atmosphere. Little did anyone know, these warriors had a mission. Rumor had it that Greg held secrets so dark that even men forged in battle would think twice. As they settled in, ordering whiskey neat, whispers began to ripple through the bar like a rising tide. A woman gasped in the corner, her hand trembling as she clutched a glass. "Did you hear?" she whispered, eyes wide. "They say he knows something about the missing girls." The room froze, eyes darting toward the bartender, who simply filled another glass, his hand steady, but his heart racing like a jackhammer. For months, reports of young women disappearing from Little Elm filled the town with anxiety, but Greg kept pouring. A tightness gripped his chest, making it hard to breathe. His mind swirled with thoughts of the secrets he buried deep, memories that had clawed at him from the shadows. What could they possibly know? Even in this quiet town, you didn't mess with the Navy, they had a way of uncovering the truth, and Greg's was a web woven with deceit. The clinking of ice in glasses faded away, replaced by the piercing silence that stretched like an elastic band ready to snap. What had he gotten himself into? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The tension crackled in the air as Greg caught a reflection in the mirror behind the bar. Those piercing seal eyes were drilling into him, unyielding, demanding answers. Just then, a loud crash broke the silence, a chair tipping over as someone stumbled back, shocked by the confrontation brewing. The tension was palpable, thick enough to slice, and Greg felt his palms start to sweat. The weight of unspoken truths hung heavy like a storm cloud ready to burst. Suddenly, the lead SEAL leaned forward, his face inches from Greg's, the intensity of his gaze sending a chill down Greg's spine. "We know you're hiding something," he growled, low and threatening. "And we're not leaving until you tell us what you know." Greg's heart raced. Could he push back? Was he ready to unveil the truth that could crack the town wide open? Or would his deadly secret remain wrapped in shadows forever? The air thickened as questions loomed, leaving everyone wondering what was bound to unravel next. The tension snapped. Greg's chest tightened like a vice, his breath coming in sharp gasps. The bar was an echo chamber of silence, every dark corner and every frightened gaze trapped in its own moment of dread. The last flicker of hope he had clung to began to fade, replaced by a sinking dread that had nested in his gut. "Greg," the SEAL pressed on, his voice like gravel. "There are women out there. Missing. We need to know if you've seen anything, or anyone." The word struck harder than the roar of a gunshot. Greg's thoughts spiraled back to the night when Amy, the last girl to vanish, had walked into the Red Fox. He remembered the way she laughed, the way her eyes sparkled with life before she disappeared into the void. A memory flooded his senses, sharp and cruel, and he closed his eyes briefly to block it out. "Just tell us," the seal continued, frustration spilling into his tone. "People's lives are at stake." Sweat beaded at Greg's brow as he weighed his choices. The weight of silence pressed down on him, as if the very walls of the tavern were leaning in, eavesdropping on the haunting truths he had buried deep. The betrayal of Amy's laughter echoed in his mind, wrapping around him like a shroud. It had been so easy to step back then. But how could he let her memory hang in the air like a ghost? Greg clenched his fists on the bar, trying to summon courage. "I don't know anything," he shouted, the desperation in his voice crackling in the stagnant air. The crowd stirred, whispers flared up again. Between shock and disbelief, the customers exchanged glances filled with confusion and judgment. Who was this quiet bartender really? But the seal didn't flinch, he just studied Greg, his expression unwavering. "You're lying. We have intel that points to you." "Intel?" Greg scoffed, the edge of panic sharpening his words. "What do you mean? Let us not play games here." A flicker of something dangerous glinted in the seal's eyes. "We've seen the patterns. Women near this bar, they go missing. You're the common link." Time stopped. Sudden realization hit him like a tidal wave. He could either give in or push back. But push back against what? The truth? The pain? Or the horror of what he had witnessed but chose to ignore? The room shifted again as more chairs scraped against the floor. The bartender's heart thundered like a war drum. Every pair of eyes was now locked onto him, waiting for a sign, waiting for a crack in his carefully constructed facade. "What if I told you," Greg began, his voice trembling yet resolute, "that I did see something I never thought to consider before?" A hushed gasp echoed in the back. What had he just committed to? The seal leaned closer, urgency etched on his face. "Then you need to tell us everything. Now." But where to begin? Where would he find the words to explain the darkness he had uncovered? The secrets whispered in drinking corners. The shadows following those fleeting moments of laughter and camaraderie. As Greg stood there, every eye glued to him like moths to a flame, the realization hit him hard. His past was about to collide devastatingly with his present. With a shaky breath, he turned his gaze to the seal. "There is something I don't know if I can say, but what if the real horror lies not in the disappearances, but in what they were drawn to?" The seal's expression hardened, fear washing over the room like an unexpected storm. The air thickened again, weighted by the unknown. What cruel twist had Greg just stepped into? As the silence stretched taut, the next question trembled on the edge, ready to unleash the storm. What lurked beneath Little Elm's serene surface was yet to be fully revealed. The whisper of air between them felt electric, charged with the weight of unspoken horrors. Greg's gaze wavered, caught between a tidal wave of regret and a desperate need to unearth the truth. "I've seen faces, strangers, hanging around after hours," he admitted, fighting to keep his voice steady. "But they were just passing through. I thought nothing of it." The seal's eyes sharpened. "You need to go back further. Think of the last few months. Who were these people?" Greg swallowed hard. "It was a group. They'd come in laughing, drinking, but then they'd leave together. Always together." He was shaking now, recalling their shadowy figures weaving through the door. There was always one guy, a tall one. He never talked much, but he watched the others, the women. The crowd began to murmur, a low thunder brewing in the air. Eyes darted toward the door, as if expecting that man to walk back in. Greg felt a ripple of panic wash over him. He was unearthing something dangerous, something that could cost him his life. But something always felt off, Greg continued, a lump forming in his throat. "I noticed them pulling the girls aside, whispers, secret smiles. I thought maybe it was just harmless flirting." Every word felt like a confession, a burden lifting, yet it was also a noose tightening around his neck. The seal leaned closer, his intensity magnifying. "Did any of them ever leave with those men, Greg?" A silence fell, tension sharp enough to cut. Greg's heart raced. He remembered Amy, her bright smile colliding with shadows. I think Amy did. She was with them the last night I saw her. I didn't want to believe it. The seal wrote something down, and Greg could see the muscles in his jaw tighten. You have to contact us if you remember anything more, Greg. Anything. We can't let this keep happening. The weight of his silence was staggering. Greg nodded, but it was more than that, an admission in every nuance of his body. The faces swam before him, each piece of laughter now a needle in his conscience. And then the room erupted. Heavy footsteps, a commotion building at the bar's entrance. Greg whipped around to see a figure standing in the doorframe, silhouetted against the dim outside lights. The crowd hushed, eyes wide in collective shock, like a sudden arrest of the night's rhythm. Derek, a voice cried out, panic slicing through the fog. The tall figure stepped fully into the bar, and Greg felt his heart clench violently. It was the man who haunted those fleeting moments, whose presence clung to the air like smoke. Derek's eyes swept the room, locking in on Greg, a sinister smile curving his lips. Looks like you've been talking too much, Greg, Derek said, his voice smooth yet menacing. You wouldn't want to get someone hurt now, would you? The seal stood tall beside Greg, unflinching against Derek's gaze, but Greg felt as though the floor could give way beneath him. Fear took root in his gut, choking any remaining resolve. This was not just about recalling the past anymore, it was a clash that threatened to expose them all. Do you really want to find out what happens next? Derek taunted, taking a step closer, his shadow loomed larger. As adrenaline coursed through him, Greg sensed the stakes rising. This confrontation wasn't just a call for answers, it was a countdown. What would Derek do if Greg revealed the truth? The crowd's tension mounted again, hearts thrumming in unison, as Derek moved closer. Would Greg stand his ground, or would fear send him retreating into the very shadows he had tried to escape? The question hung heavy in the air, an ominous prelude to a storm that was just beginning to break. What would unfold next, and who would be left standing when the dust settled? Derek's grin widened, revealing teeth that gleamed unnaturally in the dim light. It sent a shiver down Greg's spine. The air grew thick with apprehension, every second stretching into eternity. Greg's hands trembled as he forced himself to remain still, an anchor against the rising tide of dread. What do you want from me, Derek? Greg managed to find his voice, each word laced with venomous fear. He didn't recognize the man towering before him. Gone was the glimmer of camaraderie from past nights. In its place stood a predator, feasting on the scent of weakness. Derek leaned in closer, his breath hot and stale. You know, I've always been interested in how easily people talk when they think they're safe. That bar, those conversations, now I find it fascinating to see just how much of a loose tongue you are. A low murmur swept through the crowd. Greg's instinct screamed at him to keep his mouth shut, but he felt the seal at his side steady. Resolute. A lifeline in a storm. Whatever darkness Derek was lured by, they could not let it close around them. Don't threaten him, the seal said, voice low but firm. You're in no position to make demands here. Derek straightened, eyes narrowing with a calculated disdain. Is that so? You think you can protect him? He scoffed, loud enough for those lingering in the background to shift uneasily. You wouldn't last a second outside these walls if you knew what I do, and trust me, Greg, you only think you've seen the bad side of life. Greg's heart thudded wildly. Every nerve in him screamed to retreat, to flee from the specter haunting him. But the seal's unwavering stance bolstered his resolve. What do you want, Derek? He repeated, his voice stronger. Just come out and say it. Another step forward, and the crowd held its breath. Derek relished the moment, savoring the fear that sparked in Greg's eyes. I want you to understand the game you're playing, my friend. You think you know the rules. You want to help little girls like Amy. That's cute. The weight of the name fell like a stone. The bar vibrated with the collective intake of breath. Greg felt the warmth of anger wash over him, pulling him tightly against the palpable fear. "Shut up," he snapped, the words exploding from him like a desperate dam breaking. "You don't know what I'll do to protect her." The seal moved slightly, shifting between Greg and Derek, creating a protective barrier. "Walk away, Derek," he commanded. "This doesn't have to escalate." Derek's eyes sparkled with dangerous amusement. "Oh, I think it does. You don't get to play the hero here. This game is bigger than you." He leaned back, folding his arms, the casual guise of a villain too comfortable in his role. "And I'm just getting started." An electric silence enveloped them, thumping like a warped clock in the back of Greg's mind. He wanted to look away, to banish Derek's presence from this room filled with familiar faces turning into a gallery of fears. Yet, he stood paralyzed, teetering on the edge, desperately searching for a shred of hope. Suddenly, Derek stepped back, breaking the moment. "You have 1 week, Greg. If you don't bring me what I want, I'll find out how much worse I can make it for you." With that, he turned, taking long strides toward the exit. The crowd parted, allowing him to slip into the darkness. The seal remained still for a moment, absorbing the aftermath of Derek's taunt. Then he faced Greg, whose pulse was racing off the charts. "Do you understand what this means?" The seal said, gauging Greg's shaking hands and white-knuckled grip on the bar. "He knows," Greg breathed, faint realization dawning. "He knows I'm connected to Amy, and he won't let this go." And then it registered deeper. The clock was ticking, and the threat wasn't just a distant fear, it was here, looming large and sinister. Panic clawed at his throat. They had entered a deadly game, one where lives hung in the balance. "We have to move fast," the seal urged, urgency sparking to life in his gaze. "I have resources, people who can help us. We need to figure out what Derek really wants." The weight of Greg's choices pressed heavily down, reality crashing over him like icy waves. But he also sensed something flickering within, a glimmer of tenacity ignited by the fight to protect everything he had left. "What do we do next?" Greg asked, determination sharpening his voice. In that moment, they both knew there wasn't a second to waste. The sinister undertow that Derek represented was just beginning to pull them in, and they had only just scratched the surface of this nightmare. The seal looked him in the eye, resolute. "We uncover everything starting now." But in those depths of unfolding horror, one thought clung to Greg's mind: would there be enough time before someone he loved had to pay the price for their discovery? The bar buzzed with low whispers, but for Greg, the noise faded into a distant hum. He could feel the weight of Derek's threat pressing like a vice on his chest. As customers resumed their conversations, oblivious to the storm brewing just moments ago, Greg caught sight of the seal's determined gaze. "Let us step outside," the seal suggested, his voice barely above a hush. Greg nodded, following him through the throngs of casual drinkers, their laughter stark against the gravity of their situation. The cold air hit Greg as they exited, clarity washing over him like a refreshing tide. "What do we know about Derek?" The seal leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes scanning their surroundings. "Not much. Just that he's dangerous," Greg replied, his voice a shaky whisper. "He's been pushing his weight around, as if he owns the place." The seal snorted, a harsh sound. "This isn't just about asserting dominance, then. He's after something." Through the glass of the entrance, Greg caught glimpses of the lingering crowd. They were just having fun, unaware of the peril lurking right outside. A knot twisted tighter in his stomach. What could he want from me? Power. Influence. That twisted sense of control that drives men like him, the seal replied. He wants to leverage your connection to Amy. At the mention of her name, Greg felt a surge of warmth mixed with fear. He envisioned Amy's face, the laughter in her eyes, the brightness she carried. How could he let that dark cloud shadow her innocent world? He'll use her to get to me if I don't act, but what if I do? Greg bit back the growing desperation in his tone. What if I don't have it? What if I can't protect her? You have to trust yourself, the seal said firmly. We'll figure this out together. But first, we need intel. Greg's mind raced, piecing together memories, conversations he had brushed aside in the past. I overheard talk once rumors about some underground operations around here. Could that be connected? The seal nodded, his expression shifting into one of intense focus. If Derek's involved, he might have connections to those rumors. Let us start digging. We need to know what Derek's up to before his deadline hits. Fear clawed at Greg's insides, but he felt a flicker of something else resolve. Okay. Let us get to work. As they moved deeper into the fallen shadows of the night, the town felt different, alive with secrets waiting to be unraveled. They slipped into the alleys, the dim lights casting haunting shadows that mirrored the darkness creeping into Greg's heart. Suddenly, a sound caught them off guard. A distant shout, then a heavy thud echoed through the air. Both men froze. What was that? Greg whispered, instincts kicking in. Stay behind me, the seal warned, moving stealthily toward the sound. They rounded the corner, adrenaline surging as Greg's heart pounded in rhythm with each step. Peering around, they spotted two figures engaged in a heated altercation. One was a familiar-faced Derek's friend Jack, the man never too far from trouble. Looks like Derek isn't the only player in this game, the seal murmured. Before Greg could respond, Jack's voice rang out, a pained desperation spitting from his lips. You don't know what you're getting into. Maybe not, but I'm about to find out. Screamed a woman, rising from the shadows, her hands clenched into fists. Greg's breath caught. That voice, it sounded like Amy's friend, Lucy. Why was she here? Panic surged through him as he moved to step forward, but the seal's hand shot out. Wait. But it was too late. Out of nowhere, a figure lunged at Lucy, the chaos erupting in an instant. Greg's instinct screamed at him to act to protect. Lucy! He shouted, heart racing as he broke away from the seal's grip, rushing toward her. In that moment, everything he feared collapsed around him. Would he reach her in time before the dark shadows swallowed them whole? And then it struck him. Was this the beginning of a deeper conspiracy? As Lucy's terrified gaze locked onto his, Greg realized one horrifying truth: they weren't just facing Derek, they were tangled in a web of danger, betrayal, and relentless darkness that threatened to consume them all. What had they genuinely stumbled into, and would they unveil the full scope of this treachery before it was too late? Greg's heart thundered in his chest as he sprinted towards Lucy, the world around him fading into a blur. The chaos of the alley melted into silence. He could hear just the pounding of his pulse and the desperate urgency in Lucy's voice. Get away from her! He shouted, lunging forward, his instincts pushing him to protect her at all costs. Jack was grappling with Lucy, their shadows dancing erratically under the flickering streetlight. The figure attacking her wrestled with an intensity born of recklessness, as if Jack were desperate to assert himself in a world spiraling out of his control. The seal was right behind Greg, though he moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Settle down, Jack. The seal barked, his voice slicing through the tension. You need to walk away from this before it gets out of hand. But Jack's eyes were wild, swirling with desperation and fury. You don't understand. He yelled back, voice cracking. You think you know what you're up against? You have no idea. Lucy's eyes darted between Greg and Jack, fear etched across her face. With a sudden twist, she broke free momentarily, scrambling toward Greg. The breathless relief surged through him as he placed himself protectively in front of her. Lucy, are you okay? He gasped, scanning for signs of injury. She nodded, but he could see the fear in her eyes still flickering like an unsteady flame. Don't let him get to you, Greg. She urged, her voice trembling. He's dangerous. He's mixed up in things that. Before she could finish, Jack lunged again, but this time the seal was prepared. He tackled Jack to the ground with an impressive grace, locking him in place. Enough. The SEAL's voice was authoritative, unwavering. Whatever he's telling you, it doesn't matter right now. We need to get out of here. Jack struggled under the SEAL's grip, his panic turning to rage. You think this is a game? You have no clue what's about to happen. You're all in way over your heads. His words hung in the air, thickening the tension. Greg, he knows something. Lucy whispered urgently, her grip tightening on Greg's arm. He's involved, and the SEAL shoved Jack's face down against the cold concrete, keeping his grip firm. Talk. Now. Or we can do this the hard way, he growled, Jack's voice lowered, his bravado faltering. You want the truth? Derek's not just some slasher on the streets. He's at the center of something huge, something corrupt that runs deeper than you know. What Jack revealed ignited a burning curiosity in Greg, even as dread knotted in his stomach. What do you mean? What's he involved in? He's got people. Connections scattered across the city, and they're not just thugs, they run the underground. Drugs, weapons, everything. It's all about control. Jack glanced nervously down the alley. If you don't back off now, you'll put yourselves and Lucy in harm's way. The air thickened with the weight of Jack's words, crashing over them like a wave in the dark. Lucy gasped, and the fear mirrored in her eyes fueled Greg's resolve. Then we need to take him down, Greg said, the words flowing from his mouth as if drawn by a magnetic force. He glanced at the SEAL, who nodded subtly in agreement. We need a plan. Yeah. Good luck with that, Jack scoffed, but there was a tremor in his voice, betraying his uncertainty. You'll need more than a couple of amateurs to take down Derek. The moment grew heavier as the reality of their predicament set in. Could they really do this? Were they ready to step into a world that hid whispers of violence and betrayal? The SEAL lifted Jack to his feet, eyes sharp. You're in this whether you like it or not, Jack. Help us, or we'll make you wish you did. Just then, a sharp sound exploded through the alley. A gunshot echoed, shattering the darkness. The world froze. Run! The SEAL shouted, adrenaline crashing through Greg's veins like fire. They needed to flee, to escape longer arms lurking just beyond the alley. But as Greg turned to Lucy, he caught a glimpse of something glinting under the streetlight, a small object, lying forgotten amidst the chaos. Suddenly, all thoughts of escape faded. What if that object was a piece of the puzzle? Wait! We can't leave without that! He yelled, lunging for it as more sounds of chaos erupted around them. Would this lead them deeper into Derek's entanglement or offer them the key to escape? The tension mounted as Greg reached for it, the darkness closing in fast. What new truth would emerge from the shadows? Greg dove for the object, his fingers brushing against its cool surface just as another gunshot rang out. Dust and debris scattered in the air, and Greg's heart lurched in his chest. He snatched the small metal item from the ground, heavy, with sharp edges that glinted ominously under the flickering streetlight. Got it! He shouted, cradling it in his palm. Lucy's anxious gaze flicked from him to Jack, who remained locked in the SEAL's iron grip. Come on! The SEAL urged, his voice filled with urgency. We don't have time for this. But Greg couldn't shake the feeling that this was crucial. The object, an emblem of some kind, embossed with an intricate design, pulled him in. It felt like the anchor in a wild storm. Let us go! Lucy yelled, eyes wide with panic, and Greg saw the terror struggling to escape through her bravado. He knew they needed to leave, yet the shadows around them twisted, swallowing the dim light. Wait! Jack's voice sliced through the chaos. You don't even know what you have. That's part of it. Part of what? Greg snapped. Desperation clawed at the edges of his mind, but he stepped back, instinct telling him to protect Lucy. Derek's symbol. You show that to the wrong people, and they'll come for you, all of you, Jack grimaced, the fear in his eyes morphing into something else, recognition. Greg exchanged a quick glance with the SEAL. They were running out of options. Code of the underworld, Jack continued, voice shaking, it's about allegiance. You're about to embroil yourself in a war you can't even begin to understand. A siren wailed in the distance, growing louder as it approached. The comforting sound of authority, but tonight, it felt like a harbinger of dread. "Let us move." The seal shouted again, and he nodded at Greg. "We can't stay here." In a flash of clarity, Greg dropped the metal emblem into his pocket. "If this can help bring him down, we're not leaving it behind," he said, making his voice break free of the fear that held it captive. Without waiting for Jack's response, he grabbed Lucy's hand, heart hammering wildly as they turned to sprint down the alley. The seal led the way with Jack reluctantly following, still struggling against his captor's hold. As they fled down the twisting alleys, the sirens blaring closer, Jack's voice echoed behind them. "You'll regret this. You have no idea what you're walking into." "Shut up, Jack." Greg shouted back, but uncertainty gnawed inside him. What had they plunged into? They burst into a more open street, floodlights illuminating the chaos that had unfolded. Shadows darted away as people caught sight of the seal with Jack. "Greg!" Lucy cried out, tugging at his hand, her eyes scanning the street frantically. The world felt alive with danger, and every noise made them jump: the thud of footsteps, the distant chatter of late-night city-goers, all spiraling into fear. "Where do we go?" she asked, breathless. "Anywhere but here," he muttered, resisting the urge to look back. But as they rounded a corner, the air thick with vulnerability, a car screeched to a halt nearby, brimming with figures cloaked in darkness. Greg's stomach dropped. Derek's people. He could feel their presence weaving through the night like tendrils of smoke. "Get down!" The seal barked, instincts honed into action as he pulled Lucy and Greg into the shadows of a nearby doorway. Greg pressed against the cold stone, heart racing, adrenaline firing through his veins. "What now?" Lucy whispered, eyes wide and glistening with fear. Greg looked down at the emblem in his pocket. Whatever it was, it held the key to their survival or their doom. They had to figure out Derek's web of deceit, but at what cost? Just as the tension reached its peak, the car door swung open, revealing a figure that made Greg's blood run cold. Derek's voice broke through the night, promising a storm of violence that it was time to choose to hide or to fight. What would his decision unleash? The shadows closed in tighter as they pressed against the doorway, the chill of the stone seeping through Greg's shirt. He could hear the thud of his heart, pounding like a drum, and he barely noticed Lucy's grip tightening around his wrist. Who is that?" she whispered, her breath hitching in her throat. "Derek," Greg grimaced. The name felt like a curse. The man who had woven danger into their lives. The man whose emblem now sat heavy in his pocket, pulsing with threat. The darkness from the car swallowed the figure emerging from within. Greg squinted, trying to make out the details. Derek stood tall, his confident posture exuding menace. A glint of silver caught the light as he gestured, his men stepping into view, faces concealed beneath hoods, eyes cold like winter. "Where are they?" Derek shouted into the night. His voice was smooth yet laced with something dangerous, like poison masked by honey. "They can't hide from me." The seal urged, his eyes darting as he scanned the street. "Stay quiet, we need to remain unseen." Greg's stomach twisted as he watched Derek. The man had a reputation that echoed in hushed circles, the kind of reputation that made shadows fear the dark. "What do we do?" Lucy's voice trembled, each word a whisper woven with dread. He glanced at the seal, whose jaw set with determination. "We wait. Just a little longer." But that patience was slipping away, each second thick with tension. In the surreal quiet, the voices of Derek's men rang out like the tolling of a death knell. "Check the alleyways. They must be close. I want them found alive or dead. Did you hear that?" One of the cloaked figures replied, his voice low yet cruel. "They've crossed Derek. They'll pay for it." Lucy's voice barely broke through the mounting terror. Do you think they're talking about us? He felt the weight of her fear suffocating him. We need to leave. Now. With a sudden rush of adrenaline, the SEALs stepped out from their hiding spot. Don't move, he commanded, locking eyes with Greg. We can't take any chances if they see us. Just then, an engine roared to life, a car powering up at the end of the street. Greg squinted through the darkness, momentarily distracted. The sound set off a chain reaction of alarm bells ringing in his head. The clarity hit him like a slap. Wait, listen. He hissed as he looked back at the SEAL, whose eyes grew wide, flashing with recognition. They want to check, but before he could finish, Derek's voice barked a command that sliced through the night. 4 figures split from the mass, heading toward them. The SEAL was already drawing his weapon, moving into position, but all Greg could do was stare, frozen in a mixture of fear and resolve. They're coming. Lucy gasped, her voice filling with urgency, and he felt her pull away. Greg! She cried, what do we do? Run! He shouted, instinct overriding his thoughts. He grabbed her hand, heart racing as he tugged her back into the depths of the alley. They ducked behind a dumpster, trying to find any semblance of escape. The angry sound of footsteps echoed, reverberating off the walls. Their breaths rushed out, hurried and frantic. Glancing over at the SEAL, Greg could see the tension in his posture, ready to pounce like a coiled snake, but their time was running out. Stick close. The SEAL urged, eyes darting back to where Derek's men were advancing. If we split up, we're dead. We have to find a way to outsmart them. Outsmart them? Greg echoed back, doubt creeping in. They'll hunt us down. They have the numbers. Just trust me. The SEAL said fiercely, pulling them deeper into the shadows. Behind them, Derek's voice rose in anger. They can't escape. Find them. Now. The pressure mounted, pushing Greg to the brink of panic. The emblem in his pocket felt like a ticking time bomb. They had to confront this, whatever it meant. With a single look at Lucy, resolve hardened within him. As they slinked deeper into the alleys, a flash of movement caught Greg's eye. Someone else was out in the dark, someone watching. What if they could help? Wait. He whispered, halting there. Progression, willing to take a gamble, but would the shadows yield their secrets? Or would they consume him whole? Greg squinted into the darkness, his heart pounding louder than ever. Who or what was lurking beyond the veil of shadow? The alley seemed to close in on them, but instinct told him that this sudden movement might not just be an enemy. Stay behind me, the SEAL said, his voice firm as he shifted into a low stance. He was ready to act, a predator poised for the kill. Lucy squeezed Greg's hand, her eyes wide with uncertainty. We can't just stand here. What if it's Derek's men? A low rustle echoed from the other end of the alley. The shadows shifted, deepened, and suddenly, a figure leaped out, sprinting toward them. It was a man, clad in dark clothes, and he was panting heavily as if he'd run right from hell itself. Please. He gasped, stopping short just a few feet away. Strands of sweat dotted his forehead, and there was something wild in his eyes. They're coming. You have to listen to me. The SEAL didn't lower his guard, but Greg felt an unexpected rush of adrenaline. Who are you? He demanded. I'm Nick. The man replied, glancing over his shoulder, eyes darting nervously. I've seen what Derek truly is. He's not just hunting you, he's hiding something terrible. If they catch you, all will be lost. Doubt gnawed at Greg. They were on the edge of being discovered, yet something about the man's panic pulled at him. What do you mean? Nobody's safe in this town. Not after what I saw. Derek's men, they're out to eliminate everything and everyone who stands in the way of whatever he's after. The man's voice trembled. You're in way over your heads. There's a warehouse, he's keeping it all there. You need to get there first. It might be your only chance to turn things around. Turn what around? Lucy asked sharply, fear giving way to thunderous anger. What exactly are you talking about? But before Nick could reply, more footsteps echoed in the street, menacing and deliberate. The seal's eyes widened. Time's up. We can't stay here, he urged, his instincts kicking into overdrive. We need to move. Now. Greg felt torn. They had barely processed what Nick was saying, yet Derek's men were upon them, hunting them like prey. He thrust his chin toward Nick. We can't just leave him. Taking him with us could mean letting that threat follow us, the seal countered urgently. But what if he is telling the truth? Greg argued, the weight of the emblem in his pocket a tangible reminder of the looming danger. What if joining forces gives us an edge? Nick shook his head. I'm no fighter. I will only slow you down. Just run. You have to escape. Escape? No one is safe. The seal shot back. The two men locked eyes, a silent debate raging between them. Every second counted, but they needed that edge Nick offered. Together, we might have a shot, Greg asserted, determination pumping through him. I'm not leaving anyone behind. Not now. Fate twisted the knife deeper as the footsteps grew louder, and Lucy's grip tightened on Greg's arm. With a grunt, the seal lowered his weapon ever so slightly. Fine. But it's your life on the line if we are caught. Let us go then. Greg barked, adrenaline coursing through him as they began to move in unison. They darted toward the shadows where the alley met the street, mixing danger with desperation. As they dashed into a narrow passage, Greg felt the bracing chill against his skin, but this time, it was no longer fear that drove him. It was a reckless hope. Where's the warehouse? He demanded in a low voice, glancing back at Nick. 2 blocks down, west side of the river. Nick panted, urgency fueling his words. But just as they thought they were making progress, a sudden shout rang out behind them. There they are. The voice rang with sinister conviction. What now? Lucy gasped, pulling closer to Greg. Just then, Greg caught sight of a glint in the shadows, something metallic, a weapon aimed right at them. Run! The seal shouted. So they ran, the urge to survive igniting their every move as danger closed in around them. With each footfall, the past and present collided in a chaotic whirlwind, a cocktail of adrenaline, fear, and undeniable resolve. As they turned down another darkened lane, Greg could feel the weight of what lay ahead. The emblem pulsed against his chest, merging destiny with desperation. What secrets awaited in the warehouse? Would they survive long enough to uncover them? The uncertainty loomed like a thundercloud, and the storm was only beginning. They ran, hearts pounding, the echo of footsteps splintering each moment into sheer panic. Greg's lungs burned, but he pushed through the pain, driven by the thought of Lucy's safety and the bitter urgency of defeat. They slipped into the thrumming night, the city sinking deeper into shadows. 2 blocks west. Nick shouted over his shoulder, urgency flooding his words. It's just ahead. The seal took the lead, fearlessness wrapped around him like a shield. Greg caught Lucy's eye, her fear mirrored his own. Each fleeting moment felt like a race against the asphyxiating darkness that encroached with every breath they took. Stay close. The seal barked, glancing back at the ever-looming threat. The warehouse came into view, an ominous hulk silhouetted against the starlit sky. It was jagged, a reflection of the dangers they faced, but it also held the promise of answers, a chance to confront the shadows that had haunted their lives. They approached the entrance, an iron door loomed ahead, its surface battered and scratched. Here. Nick pushed the door, but it didn't budge. Greg's fingers trembled over the handle, willing the door to yield. His heart slammed against his ribcage. Just then, a shout erupted behind them. This way. The urgency crashed over them like a tidal wave. Please, move. Greg shouted, shoving against the door with his shoulder. With one last push, the door creaked open, and they stumbled into the warehouse, gasping as the scent of rust and aged wood filled their lungs. The room was littered with crates and shadows. But there was something oddly still about it, as if the darkness pressed against them a shroud waiting to smother their resolve. "Where do we go?" Lucy whispered, scanning the swaths of gloom that loomed large. "Stay close together," the seal instructed. "We need to find a vantage point, something that lets us see who's coming." They maneuvered through the maze of crates, the light from the street barely seeping in. Every creak of the floor sent their heads snapping around, and Greg's breath stuttered in his chest. Just then, the seal froze, a primal instinct kicking in. "I think I heard something," he hissed, his eyes darting toward the shadows. Greg's heart raced. Had Derek's men caught up? Panic clawed at him. "What do we do?" he managed to ask, fear creeping into his voice. "Listen." The seal set his stance, like a wolf preparing for battle. A faint shuffle echoed behind one of the crates. Greg swallowed hard as adrenaline surged through him. The emblem weighed heavy in his pocket, an anchor tethered to the unseen danger lurking so close. Suddenly, a figure stepped into the dim light, a man clad in dark gear, face half hidden. It wasn't Derek, but someone just as dangerous. "There they are," the man called, a smirk on his face. "Run!" the seal ordered. They turned to sprint, but it was too late. The man already raised his weapon, a glint of metal catching the remains of the light. Everything slowed. Greg could practically feel the ice in the air. The seal lunged forward, tackling the man as gunfire erupted. The sound thundered through the warehouse, ricocheting off the walls and sending splinters flying. "No!" Greg shouted, pulling Lucy back, her terrified grip over his arm squeezing tighter. His heart beat louder than the chaos. The seal wrestled the gunman to the ground, a clash of wills, and in that instant, Greg felt the full weight of the truth. They were entrenched in a fight for their lives. It was now or never. "Find cover!" the seal roared, wresting the weapon from the man's grip. Greg yanked Lucy into an adjoining room, adrenaline coursing through him like wildfire. The gunman struggled, and the sharp scent of gunpowder hung thick in the air. "Is he okay?" Lucy breathed, anxiety rippling through her voice. "We just need to keep moving," Greg replied, scanning the room as they hurried onward. The warehouse felt like a labyrinth, endless passages shadowed in secrets and dangers. But Greg's resolve hardened. They couldn't let Derek win. They couldn't let fear take hold. They burst into another section, catching sight of equipment, supplies stacked high. It was here they noticed a flicker on a wall. A computer terminal sat in the corner, glowing softly against the backdrop of chaos. "Greg!" Nick's voice sliced through as he emerged into the room. "This is our shot. We need data, something to show what's really going on here." Greg rushed over, heart quickening. "Can you access it?" "I can try." Nick dove for the terminal. "Cover us!" the seal yelled, subduing the raging gunman as he struggled fiercely. As Nick worked the terminal, fingers flying, Greg glanced back to the seal, sweat streaming down his face, every muscle taut, every movement calculated. Would they make it out alive with the proof they needed? "Got it!" Nick exclaimed, triumph sparking his voice. But it was short-lived. "Get down!" the seal cried out, shoving Greg and Lucy behind a crate as gunfire spat through the air, deafening and violent. Bullets ripped at the shelves, sending debris everywhere. Greg instinctively shielded Lucy as they huddled beneath the scrap, confusion clawing at them. "We need to go now," the seal shouted, the urgency coursing through his words, but as the gunfire held steady, Greg felt his resolve waver. What if they had just rendered everything worse? What if it was already too late? "Find a way to block them off," the seal commanded. "We can't let them know we're in here," Nick urged, frantic, but Greg's heart raced in a different direction. They had to hold on to hope. They had to fight for it. "Here!" Greg shouted, spotting an old storage door at the back, wooden but sturdy. Let us barricade ourselves. Go, go. The seal barked, redirecting his focus as the gunman stirred. They dashed for the door, adrenaline pumping as they pushed it shut, bracing against it. The adrenaline surged as they struggled to lock it tight, the echo of chaos distantly ringing in their ears. Are we safe? Lucy asked, the tremor in her voice but a whisper, her breath quickened with palpable fear. For now, Greg replied through a clenched jaw, resolve fueling his voice. What do we do? Nick questioned, looking at the screen still pulsing behind them. We have to get it out before they close in. Just hold on. Greg steeled himself, uncertainty gnawing at him. As bullets fired around them, a fierce determination ignited within him. Selena's voice echoed in his mind, whispering encouragement, pushing him to stand tall. We can do this. Together. That sense of unity wrapped around them, fusing their spirits, urging them forward. From beyond the door, the world dissolved into chaos, but here, they stood on the precipice of a new battle, a fight not just for survival, but for truth, all hands on deck. Time to break the darkness. The emblem nestled deep in his pocket pulsed with energy, a promise of potential yet unfulfilled. Let us finish this. Would they unravel Derek's web of deceit? Would they have the courage to confront the storm ahead? They would find out together. The fight was far from over.